Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Conquer the Clutter. It's great to see everybody back. My goodness, right out of the gate, people are sitting in the waiting room waiting. That is great. Great. Good to see you. So we're going to do a little bit of a recap, but from a slightly different angle today. We've done boundaries and limits before, but now we're going to do boundaries and limits to ourselves as well as to others. All right. And we're going to do a deeper dive into boundaries and limits. We're going to look at a lot of, over the next few weeks, look at a lot of issues that play into the need or the difficulty setting boundaries and limits. And no one is telling you the truth if they say that starting to set boundaries and limits is an easy, natural thing. You know you need to do something, but generally setting those boundaries and limits is almost fear-producing for some people, all right? Especially the people we love, all right? And especially for ourselves as well. We often forget that component, the component of what we do with others, we must first do with and for ourselves, right? Especially, all right, when we're vulnerable to things like depression, anxiety, procrastination. And you know that procrastination topic is like an iceberg, okay? If you don't remember just how complex procrastination can be, go back to the podcasts that are in the library and spend a little time catching up, just reminding yourself, finding yourself in the information, all right? Everything about procrastination, everything about hoarding, everything about clutter is not necessarily true for every person. What I want you to do is to find yourself in that information, right? And then use it. So many people catch themselves just simply distracted, or maybe entertaining ideas and options, or a thinking process that conveniently distracts when you're getting right down to the core issue that you need to deal with, because chances are that's going to be a little bit disquieting, all right? So whether you procrastinate or whether you simply distract yourself, sometimes we're doing that. Quite often we're doing that. And I want you to really consider this. This is a biggie concept for today's podcast. Could it be because you have no plan that you are committed to and, more importantly, accountable to? When you set a goal, when you draw up a plan, you have the intention, clearly, or at least the thought, to undertake whatever it is. Are you committed to it? And you know how you know if you're committed to it? Because you hold yourself accountable. In the same way as you would hold yourself accountable if you gave your word to someone else. Do not forget yourself in the process of whatever goals, ambitions, desires, wants, needs. I'll tell you why. Because if you don't hold yourself accountable, if you don't make yourself an equal partner in the work that needs to be done, it applies to you, not just to others, you are far more likely to accept and settle for things to meet your needs, because things are always available. See this week if you can question yourself when you have an impulse to get something, to pick something up, to keep something, not to let something go, that really in your heart of hearts, you know, you're really working the logic to make it useful. It's really a fear or an unsettled feeling, that lack of certainty. Will I need it? I might need it. Question that. And start setting the boundaries and limits that we're going to talk about today, next week, and the following week. Start setting those for yourself as well. Lots of ways to make yourself accountable. None of them hurt. All right. Many people, most people actually recognize when they need to set boundaries. They often don't call it boundaries. They call it some other word that's more palatable to them, all right? But when they don't move forward, when they let it drift, when they say, oh, it was just, you know, they were in a bad mood, or, oh, it was just some other extraneous once in a lifetime event. What that can mean, and if you do that frequently, all right, when you get that kind of shaky feeling of, uh-oh, I have to do something here about this because I don't want it repeated. Could it be that you're afraid of making someone mad? Or at a minimum, heaven forbid, create an uncomfortable situation? Could it be that? Do you call uncomfortable situations conflict? No. You can have conflict with someone and there's no uncomfortable situation. It's simply a difference of opinion. It's simply that you don't have a meeting of the minds, or you have different needs or different values, or a desire for different outcomes. Doesn't have to be. There is nothing about conflict that says it has to be uncomfortable or nasty. Okay? Because being clear actually supports better relationships with yourself and with others. So when you're clear, whatever the truth is, consider it, think about it, consider it. If you're not sure, run it by people who you trust, and then synthesize it down to, this is the core issue. And then explain to whoever else might be involved, I need to talk to you about something important to me. All right, that gives them a heads up. But before you can be clear and before you can improve those relationships, don't make the mistake of thinking this is just naturally going to roll off your tongue. All right? There's work to be done to get there first. All right? And it is work. And that work sometimes is not a kumbaya moment. All right? Sometimes there's a lot of shakiness inside. There's a lot of wanting to talk yourself out of it. There's a lot of, oh, maybe I'm just blowing it up. Oh, it was. And then we start to particularize it. Have you ever noticed that when something's uncomfortable? Oh, this isn't worth really making an issue of because some tiny little factor, right? We want to make it about that. But if you're bumping your head on the same tiny little factor time after time after time after time, okay, maybe you need to change your prescription for looking at it. Maybe you need to accept that what you're making this issue into that does require boundaries and limits is really about your needs to be seen, to be heard, to be accepted. And accepted does not mean that you're claiming to be right or that you're claiming to be perfect. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to be somewhere off the scale of the absolute definition of whatever that thing is. All right. You don't have to meet criteria. It's about your needs. It's about, this is who you are as a person. This is what you need. And it doesn't necessarily have to be rational. What it can't be, however, what it can never be, is claiming somebody else's rights and somebody else's turf, their space. It can never be about someone else having to compromise their needs. All right. And how does that work when you have competing needs? You agree to disagree. You agree to compromise. If I give a little on this, can you give a little on that, so that we meet in the middle? Neither of us is 100% happy, but neither of us is 100% ignored or disrespected or left having to compromise all of our need so that you can have all of your need. All right, that's work. That's the work. And sometimes those discussions leave you feeling open and raw. All right. Know this though, both big and small boundaries are important. I talked in the past about A-list needs, B-list needs, C-list needs. We're not talking about objects or tangibles here. We're talking about your psychological, your emotional needs, physical needs sometimes. All right. Your A-list needs are things that are basic to who you are. Every moment of every day, no matter what the situation, you need that. You need love. You need acceptance. You need forgiveness. You need to be told the truth. There has to be your own unique level of predictability. You have to know you're making a contribution and that you're vital to whatever the relationship is. You're important. And you need to be acknowledged for that. Doesn't mean you're more important than anybody else, but it means you're equally important. All right. And for some people, for me, one of my A-list needs is loyalty. Loyalty and truth. Loyalty and truth. We can work out anything, even if we don't like it a lot. All right. If we tell each other the truth. All right. And if we treat each other with compassion. Compassion does not mean you roll over every time somebody does something and make an excuse for them. That's called enabling. It's also called codependent. Okay. There are boundaries and limits with compassion. All right. B-list needs, those are the needs that most of the time you need regularly. They're there, they are important. Now, you don't need them every moment, every day, every interaction. They could be things like enough time with the person, that if you have diametrically opposed interests, you're not left watching the sports channel all the time. All right. You're not having to give up Thanksgiving dinner in honor of the Super Bowl or whatever that blasted game involving balls is that happens coincidentally with one of the biggest family events of the year. All right. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. But generally, a compromise is needed with your B-list needs, right? Your C-list needs. Your C-list needs are those things that would just be the icing on the cake. This would be like a perfect day. It happened for me driving gosh, it must be almost 2 years ago now, with my son on Mother's Day. We were coming back from probably picking up dinner, and a Porsche went by, a Porsche Cayenne went by. And I just said, oh, I would love someday to actually drive a Porsche, not to own it. I don't want to pay to maintain it and upkeep. Okay. I would love to drive a Porsche Cayenne someday. Oh. And guess what? My son listened, he heard, he hid that away. And when he got home, he got on his cell phone, and he'd forgotten to get a Mother's Day gift, and he made it right. Okay. And he said, done. Your gift is done. I said, done? What's done? He said, I just bought you access to a test drive of a Porsche Cayenne at this place. And he said, you can go anytime. Then COVID hit. I'm going to be doing that very soon, because in Eastern Ontario, we have had no COVID cases in the last 5 days and no deaths. Porsche Cayenne, here I come. All right, and I don't care who's touched it before I got in it. Do you see what I'm talking about? That's the fun. What are your C-list needs? Once in a while, if they could come true, whoo, all right, that would just be the icing on the cake. Light your day. If you don't know what your A-list needs are, you need to do homework, people, because you're wandering around with no compass, bumping into things that feel good. And then what? Following it like a bloodhound for the scent of good? You need to know it here. It needs to be part of your plan. It needs to be incorporated into your goals so that you don't find it by accident or trip over it. You actually are looking for it and you can identify it. You make it a priority, and your B-list needs. Don't trade off too many of those. All right, that can turn into codependence. You should be negotiating for your B-list needs and the other person's B-list needs so that everybody gets enough. All right? And if you trade it off for a while for a good reason, you're entitled to a whopper later on. No ledger sheet here, but you're not sacrificing. You don't feel put upon or victimized or used or hard done by. Okay? And you need to do that for yourself, because resentment, we're going to talk next week about the side effects of not setting boundaries and limits and how those poison people. They poison your emotional state. They poison your thinking. They poison your relationships. So don't make a mistake. Both big and small boundaries. If you've been holding back because you didn't want to make someone angry, you didn't want to ruin a good moment, you didn't want to cause tension, you hate conflict, all of those things, then maybe you've been holding back and not using that communication skill set that you have inside. Once you have clarity about what your needs are, once you have that clarity, you have the skill set to describe that. Describe it whatever way feels right to you. All right. So long as you're not blaming the other person for your reactions. Their reactions are their own. You are not responsible for the other person's actions. There's always a choice. And you don't get to blame someone else for your reactions either. All right? Okay. So, if it's so necessary, why isn't this like learning to walk? Why don't people automatically and naturally start to set boundaries and limits? Could it be that those people don't actually take you seriously? And here's a thought. Could that be because actually you're not giving off any signals that you respect yourself, your own boundaries, or that you're taking yourself seriously? If every time you back away from it, why would anyone take that seriously? If every time the best you can manage is to silence yourself, to feel badly, to go away and feel injured, why would anyone take that seriously? You're not being your own advocate. You are not being your own interpreter. Well, for heaven's sakes, don't let anybody else be your interpreter. If you don't know how you feel, if you are uncertain, the other guy is completely off the wall. How can he possibly know? Randomly, somebody might make a guess or an assumption or say something, but is that good enough for your emotional life? And the emotional part, the communication part of a relationship with somebody close enough to you? Is it possible that you aren't taking yourself seriously? Ask yourself now, are there situations where actually that is to some degree true? Think about it before you discard that idea. And of course I take myself seriously. If that answer came too quickly, you didn't actually consider how often and how much that's true. It might be true, but it's only really true after you've taken time to think about it and run it by a few situations that didn't go well. All right? Because what about all of those goals, all of those plans that you wrote down that remain just words on paper? Are you taking yourself seriously? Do you keep a journal where you list everything? Lists are just the first step. If you keep a journal where you write everything down and you are ticking those off regularly or working toward ticking them off regularly, this ain't school, people. These are not lines that you have to write. This is your life. This is the very core of what will bring you meaning and happiness. It's not just a question. Some people say, and I've heard this, well, maybe I don't feel worthy. Well, sometimes that's true, but that isn't as true as most people think. Sometimes it's that you're not making the effort. All right? You're just not following through after the thought part with developing the skills, the accountability to yourself, no one else, to act on what your goals, dreams, wishes, responsibilities to yourself first, and then to others are. Accountability to oneself for the riches we want in our own life. That's the name I should have named this podcast. And it's set by boundaries and limits. What you don't allow yourself to do, not perfectly, but a good deal of the time, because you make yourself accountable. Okay? It can just be that you haven't developed the skills to follow through on what you really want. Okay? Big question here. Is it time to start developing those skills? Is it time? Is it time to give up lamenting the not acted on plans and goals? Is it time? Okay, it is time. In tiny ways every day. every day. Start with the small stuff. First of all, start setting boundaries and limits on things that are sucking away your time, your energy, your focus, your optimism, that child in you who dreams, that part of you who's on your side, who's prepared to be your critic when you start going off or you start getting distracted or you think, this is a lot of work. It is, but you've got to be alive doing something. You might as well be loving yourself and loving other people. You got a better plan for the day? There isn't a better plan for the day. Love yourself and love other people and invest in that. Even if it is your kitty, even if it is your dog, all right? It's love. Love is love. And love never dies. Even when the people you love have to leave you, love never dies. It sustains you. What you invested in those relationships, how you confronted when they could have gone off course to get them back on a better course, that sustains you forever. It's worth the time, it's worth the effort. It's also worth the time those foundation baby steps take in the form of goals, like, I hate to nag, but 15 minutes a day of decluttering. Oh, nobody lost eye contact. I love that. Good, good. You owe yourself 15 minutes a day. And if you could marry it with not letting the little stuff build up, you know those things when you put them down and you think, oh, it's just for now. Those just for now moments. Okay. Glom it on like it's a magnet. Tag it to wherever it goes within no more than 4 to 5 steps from where you use it. And leave it. Leave it where it belongs. If you could do those two things, woot woot, you have no idea how fast you can travel through other things. On top of the things that are on your goal list, activities that belong to today, you get to 100% without blinders, without guilt, without, oh, I can't accept that invitation because I've got so much work to do. Do you think that ever made you stay home and do the work? No. No. Those two things, depriving yourself of a positive, as long as it's not buying more stuff or acquiring more stuff. Well, no. Joy, fun, and play every day, folks. That's where your fuel's coming from. Learning, growing, developing human being. I want to know more about boundaries and limits. I want to know more about the language. I want to know more. I want to take a shortcut and figure out, how do I get started? How do I get started? And you know what? I'm going to set one goal towards setting boundaries and limits that suck away all of the time, energy, and focus. All right? I may actually delete Netflix from my software. I can always get it back. I can always get it back. There's nothing that you give up in the interests of moving forward that you can't get back, except a damaged relationship. Is it possible that you don't hold people accountable? You're afraid to be rejected. You're afraid that there isn't enough, the tendons holding you together in that relationship are not sound enough if you hold people accountable for what they do. Do you apologize to yourself or to others? I'm really sorry to have to say this, but who's going to listen to that? All right. No one is going to take that one seriously. That's like a boxer being on the ropes to say, gee, I'm really sorry, I have to punch you. All right, like, you're on the ropes, folks, by the time you're apologizing for something that is your right. Do you apologize in your own mind? Do you second guess it later? Oh, I could have said that better. Oh, I really shouldn't have. Oh, they really didn't take that well. I probably am responsible for escalating. No, if they escalate for their own reasons. All right? You are not responsible unless you deliberately set out to do that and you didn't stop until they did it. All right? No, you are not responsible for other people's reactions. And they're not responsible for yours either. We all have choices. Do you allow too much flexibility when you're trying to set a limit or a boundary? Sometime I'd like you to get back to me about this. Not realistic timeline, not precise enough. This one, many people do. They equivocate. They say something, it feels a little shaky, so they equivocate. Do you speak in uncertain terms? So the person's listening to you. They know you're asking for something. They know maybe you don't like something that they said or did, and you'd like them not to say or do it again, but they're really not sure what you're talking about. Clarity supports healthy relationships. Clarity is not blaming others. All right, examples are, maybe you haven't verbalized your boundaries. Maybe you're giving off all sorts of behavioral signals. And inside, are you saying to yourself, well, they could have seen by how upset I was that I didn't like that or that. Nope. Nope, that's not clear enough. Nope. Nope. All right. If you haven't verbalized it, if you haven't done the work to know exactly in a non-blaming way how to express what it is you don't want more of, you haven't done your work first. Don't expect them to understand it or to accept it or to feel anything other than genuinely confused. And you know what? Here's the other thing. If you settle for that, they may make an effort. They may have the best of intentions, positive intent, but you may get the wrong thing solved. Okay? Clarity supports healthy relationships. The other thing too is some people take repeating, assuming that stating your boundaries once is enough. I think there is an average of people have to read something, 7 times before they actually get it. They actually can remember it. They carry it with them. It's okay to repeat yourself. Nag, no, not nag, but the first time you see the inkling of whatever it is you set the boundary about. This is feeling a lot like that, and I would prefer this as an outcome, all right? Because I feel this when you do that. You're not blaming them, you're describing, this is how I feel. And if that's not okay with you, if that is your goal, you've achieved it. If it's not your goal, then let's do something about it. And I want to know when I do the same to you. Maybe you assume that people will figure out what you want based on previous violated boundaries. No, context is everything. Remember, you're not the same person every day. every moment of every day. The context, maybe for someone to contradict you in private, no, that's not right. All right, might be one thing, because that might be the beginning of discovering a difference of opinion that you can resolve by compromise. But maybe being contradicted in front of friends and family and like all the time, maybe that context changes it. No, that's not on, you know, because that makes you feel put down because you think the other person is trying to exhibit themselves as a smarty pants at your expense. It's okay. Take them aside and tell them, in this context, that's not on. If you feel that or you think that, we can talk about that in a different setting. Okay. Most people, if they're awake and listening, realize that something isn't working in a relationship, okay, or in a communication with someone else. And at best, they have an inkling that something's needed. Sometimes we actually know we need to set boundaries, but we have no clue. Maybe we weren't raised with boundaries and limits. Maybe we weren't taught or respected as children, as young people, as adults in previous relationships. Maybe this is a foreign concept. Maybe you were taught values and behaviors and attitudes like, well, if you love somebody, you know, you don't disagree with them. Or if you love somebody, you want to make them happy. And so you let them offend you. You don't take yourself so seriously. They didn't mean it. On the 12th time, they meant it. All right. When you give them the liberty to set a pattern, they meant it. All right. You've got to be guided by what's in your heart, what your emotional baseline is. The other thing too is setting boundaries helps you establish peace. Okay? Helps you establish peace in your relationships. A frequent stumbling block in getting started after we overcome the dread of having to say something that might be received as unwelcome, might even make us feel uncomfortable, is that we often don't know how to express, or we feel shy or uncomfortable or exposed, vulnerable when we express our needs. All right? If that's the issue, is the issue that you don't trust the other person. That's an important boundary and limit. You need to have a fundamental trust in the other person. I was working with a young woman yesterday, and one of the stumbling blocks is that when she expresses her needs, when she lays it open, okay, she has experienced in the past that person then using that knowledge of her vulnerability against her. All right? You need to trust the person. And if you're not 100% sure, then you need to express that. I'm not feeling safe telling you my true feelings because in the past you have done this, and that's not okay. That's not okay. All right. The other thing I really like about Nedra's book is the offering actual wording. Sometimes just coming up with the language as a first step is one of the hardest parts. And she offers actual wording just as suggestions. What I would want you to do, however, is to use that in practice runs in front of a mirror. I'm responsible for helping myself. Rule number 2 from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. Antidote, not anecdotes. Know the pattern setting bad behavior. I was trained in accepting that kind of behavior from a step parent. You are not alone. I have some horror stories from clients, and you just have to wonder what those people did to their karma, if you believe in karma. They were your influential step parent for a precise period of time. And you are not responsible or accountable to them now. So help that little one inside you who is responding, all right, to whatever this negative pattern of behavior is, right? Hold her by the hand. And as an adult, you take authority back. Right? You decide. And it's okay to decide by experiment. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how you're going to know for sure that it's a yes, it's a no, or it's a non-starter. All right, you've got to experiment. Little experiments with what looks like you're moving in the right direction and you're doing the right things first for yourself and then for others. Experience is that when it comes to setting boundaries in my most challenging toxic relationships, I've had most success in verbalizing boundaries, actions I'm taking versus telling them what I need them to do. Yeah, you can't actually tell them what they need to do. You can only tell them what you need and what you'd like to see as a result. How they get there, that's up to them. Let me have a look. I don't like saying no. Okay, let's work on it. Because no is an essential part to your self-esteem. Not that you have to say yes or no all the time. Just need to say it when it's true for you. Because every time you say yes and it's not true for you and it costs you something, you are disrespecting yourself. All right? You are minimizing your own worth and your own self-esteem, which doesn't mean you have to go to the other extreme and be a tyrant, all right? Or a princess or a, Lord of the Manor. You are equal to everyone else on the face of the earth, all right? You are as important, not more important. Sometimes it's clear and easy saying no. It becomes challenging when people disregard your no or become vindictive, mean, or violent. If they become vindictive, mean, or violent, walk away. Don't expose yourself to it. You don't have to process that. They have to process that. They're accountable. All right. So sometimes it is easy. But if you know that people are likely to become vindictive or mean or violent, challenge it right away. Say to them, it seems to me that this response is coming from me saying no on this. And it's unfortunate that you're not happy with that, but it doesn't cost you anything significant. It doesn't cost you anything that's vital to you to be respectful of me, to listen and allow me to finish a sentence before you interrupt me. When I really am looking forward to something and I want to celebrate with someone, just to say, be a witness to it. It doesn't cost you anything. And if it does, then, maybe we need to rethink our friendship. I cannot always think on the spot to say something back to someone. That is very, very common. If someone says something hurtful to me or something inappropriate, I then write them a letter later to say how I feel. If not, comfortable speaking with them, yes, that's perfectly legitimate, so long as you say it. And it's perfectly okay too, if you don't write a letter, just to say, it's hard to know what to say about that, but I will get back to you. I don't want to lash back at you for that, because that's not who I am. I'm going to give what I really want you to hear, some thought, and then I expect you to make time for me to share that with you. You're just claiming your space. So good. We have gone through all of the messages. I want to thank you for coming. Thanks for making my week.